Hey guys, what I've got laid out here is a Motorola VT71 blonde version. I have just finished refinishing the cabinet and polishing up all the various bits of hardware, and it's time to put it back together. I thought you might find it interesting, so I've laid it all out here, and I'm going to videotape this as I put it back together. What I've got here, first off, is the copper-plated chassis, speaker, picture tube, and the shield for the picture tube. Here's all the tubes and tube shields. There's 4 knobs. There's various bits of hardware. The tube replacement diagram. Hopefully the only 2 tools I'm going to need, a 1/4-inch hex driver and a Phillips screwdriver. Here's the back. Here's the bottom. Here's the control panel, the logo. Here's the front faceplate, and finally here's the cabinet itself. The first step to putting one of these together is actually to mount the CRT, which is also one of the most difficult parts to do, and I'll show you why. Here's the inside of the cabinet. Here's where the speaker mounts. Here's where the controls stick out the front, and there's where the picture tube goes. Now the way this support works is the picture tube sits in a cup, a rubber cup, that goes into the front of the cabinet. There's a groove on the rubber mask that fits into the wood of the cabinet. On the front it has a rectangular cutout, and that's the viewable area. And the back is a round cup that corresponds to the curvature of the picture tube, so it sits in it like so. Now the only thing that actually holds this picture tube in place, other than just some friction in that rubber cup, is this little bracket sticking down here. The way that works is the picture tube neck rests up against there, and you wrap the strap around it and you bolt it down. And that's all that holds this picture tube in. Easily the worst mounting system of any set I've ever worked on. But that's how they did it, so that's how I'm going to remount it. Oh, I should also note there is a nice piece of asbestos up here. That is right above the ballast tube. It generates quite a bit of heat. So you either need to just leave it alone or replace it with some type of material, maybe a sheet of aluminum, something that can take the heat so the wood doesn't scorch. I was leery at first, but I asked around with other restorers, and many of these sets have been restored, and the general consensus was to just leave it alone. So that's what I'm going to do. Now these masks are notorious for disintegrating. Amazingly, the one that came with this set is at least somewhat intact. The early synthetic rubber type material they used just did not stand up to time. Just falling apart. Usually when you find these sets, these have actually melted all over the inside of the set. It almost looks like hardened toothpaste or caulking. One good thing is that some warm water will easily dissolve this, so you don't have to scrape it off. You can actually dissolve it off and use a sponge to work it out. Now, luckily, there's a guy who found a mask that was in even better shape than this and made a mold of it, and he sells reproduction rubber masks. They're a little bit pricey, but hey, I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, you can either try to roll your own or try to build one up from maybe some foam window insulation or something like that, but I think it's worth the money because this does fit quite nicely. Alright, so the next step is to seat this properly, and then I need to take the shielding, which is also very crude but important. It helps any interference from blocking any interference from getting on the picture tube. So there's a cone that goes around the belt like that, and this is just a piece of a strip aluminum that's rolled into a coil, and that goes around like so. And then I need to place the picture tube inside. get it all seated nicely, and then put this bracket on. However, before you just go ahead and do that, there is something very, very important. These picture tubes, to get the picture square horizontally and vertically, you have to rotate this correctly. Unlike a set with a yoke, those don't matter how you position the picture tube, because the yoke is what actually determines the horizontal and vertical plane. But on these, it's a physical property of the picture tube. So if you were to just blindly pop this in the set, tighten it down, and hook the TV up, your picture's probably going to be at some crazy angle. So what I'll do is get this in approximately the right position, which I kind of know, because when I look at the chassis, I can look at the socket and see how it's oriented and kind of eyeball it and get this close. And then I will leave this a bit loose. So once I get this up together and actually have it turned on and playing, I'll have to carefully rotate this into the final position before tightening it down. I will put down the camera for a little while I get this all seated and squared away. Well, that wasn't too bad. I've got the CRT mounted securely in place. One thing I did do was I added a little bit of foam padding between the metal neck shield and the glass to reduce any chances of it breaking as I tighten down these nuts. It's still loose enough though that I can rotate it if needed when I power this set up and see how the picture looks. Here's how it looks from the front. So you can see now it forms a bit of sort of a rectangular picture over that round picture tube. Now what I want to do is put the tubes back in the chassis and power it up one last time before I put it into the chassis to make sure everything's working properly. So, got my tubes, got my handy dandy tube chart. One thing to note though is that this is the bottom view, so it's actually a mirror image. So you can kind of see how from the cutout there, so I'll just have to flip everything in my brain as I put these tubes in. Oh, and I've got it upside down. First up, I'm going to do the, well, I guess it'd be easier to do this way and rotate the chassis around so I can read everything. There we go. Alright, so first of all, the ballast tube. It's the largest tube and it looks quite a bit different than the others. And that's what they call M5 here for some reason today. Giving it a tube number. And that goes in right here. Let's see, 12SN7. This chassis is copper plated and I did spend some time polishing it up. Not necessary by any means, but I think it looks nice. I did go over the aluminum shields a bit too. Like 12SN7. It's right there. And so on and so forth. Six. Yeah, I think you get the idea. I'll resume recording when I've got all the tubes back in place and show you how the tube shields go on.